Welcome, everyone, to Cyber Judo. I'm your host, Christian Scott, with the team at Tantalum Security. Welcome back to episode 3 of our 6-part webcast series on responsible AI adoption. Today, we're going to be moving from the ownership into vendor decision-making process into one of the most practical challenges that organizations face up against in their AI governance journey, which is finding the AI in the first place across the business and understanding what's already happening across the business as AI is interacting with company data, systems, and processes. As always, I'm joined with my compliance bestie, Pat, here with the active compliance and ethics team. And Pat brings that governance expertise and that compliance perspective that's really helpful for building a great culture and ensuring that AI is adopted in a responsible and ethical manner, while I am a bit of more of a techie, geeky nerd on the cybersecurity front and trying to figure out what technical controls can be put into place while building that with the culture. That being noted, team, if you're joining us on LinkedIn Live or YouTube, remember that we always love to hear people's questions. So feel free to, throughout the session, drop any comments that you have in LinkedIn Live or on YouTube, and we can certainly bring them up on screen, make it part of the conversation that we're having here as we're trying to provide insights on adopting AI securely and in a well-governed manner. As also another good reminder for folks, everything we share in this series is from real-world practical experience helping organizations build and mature their AI programs, from smaller investment firms all the way up to larger enterprises. And all the insights that we're trying to provide here through the Cyber Judo series in combination with Tantalum Security, as well as the ACEG team. All those insights are completely free. No sponsorships, no advertisements, no registration walls, just real guidance, no bullshit from practitioners here. Today, we're going to be diving into the topic of hunting the shadow AI. So we're going to be covering a little bit about why you can't govern what you can't see, how AI enters the business through different vectors and tangents, why I don't know or we don't know isn't a defensible position when we talk about adopting AI for the organization, and some practical tips, tactics, techniques on helping discover AI, help to regulate AI throughout the organization with various technical controls, also implanted with great company processes, culture, and governance. Just before I hop into things, Pat, why don't you tell our audience here just a refresher about yourself and your background?
Well, thank you, Christian. A little bit of background. I am a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, like a federal officer, that was working as an expert in anti-corruption, compliance, and risk management. And I also started an NGO, the Canadian Center of Excellence for Anti-Corruption, and of course ACEG, to help organizations build their capacity to more effectively manage risk. And I'm not your level of technology, but I'm a small tech nerd. So that's why on AI and governance, it's one of my passions.
I love it, good sir. It's like it comes together like peanut butter and chocolate. Thinking about your background, absolutely, by the way, and my background. So, yes, I come from a background of, being an ethical hacker and organizations having us break into their systems and doing social engineering and real-time deep fake attacks and all that kind of stuff, right? And you come from a background of law enforcement. So every time we do one of these webcasts, I always think it's kind of like almost like a game of like cops and robbers. You remember
yes,
that? Being
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've got your wanted poster on my wall here, so.
Especially with like the whole get up. And
yes, absolutely.
Like I'm out of like an old Western. I love it. So team, just as a reminder, again, this is part of our webcast series. We've got 6 installments here. Every 2 weeks, we're essentially getting together, providing insights for folks and whatnot. So beyond what we're going to be talking about today, following that will be, I believe it's around August 26th, deploying the right culture and technical controls. Then a little bit into September, early September, we'll be talking about breaking the AI before someone else does. So AI red team testing, that's going to be my favorite one personally. And then at the end of September, we'll be kind of bringing everything together, coalescing all the different elements of the major 5 parts we've covered into one cohesive roadmap for you guys. So with that being noted and jumping right into hunting the shadow AI, I want to kick us off with setting the frame on how AI enters the business and all that kind of stuff. But before I dive into all the nuances and the technical elements of that, Pat,
Yes, sir.
why don't you tell everyone a little bit about why the discovery of shadow AI is just critical from like a governance and compliance perspective?
Well, you mentioned it at the start. You can't govern what you can't see. And when you talk about technology, when you talk about AI, when you talk about risk, is that if you don't know what your risk you're facing, how the hell are you going to be able to manage it? And with shadow AI, the stuff that you don't know actually exists within the organization. So let's be clear, okay? In your organization, wherever you work right now, whoever's listening to us, you have people that are using technology, AI tools that you don't know and they're not sanctioned. And that increases your risk profile and it's increasing also your inability to be able to manage that risk. And with the advent of agentic AI, where it can autonomously, create havoc and do amazing things, because let's be clear, we're not here to say AI is dangerous and you shouldn't use it. No, it's about managing AI so you can get the most out of it. But if you don't know what your risk profile is, if you don't know who is using what within your organization, what access to your data, to your IP, how vulnerable are you now for hacking because people are bringing in shadow AI or vibe coding and shadow code within that vibe coding? If you are not aware, if it's not visible to you, how can you manage it? How can you mitigate it? And how can you prevent it? So, moving on to continue on that conversation, because it's really important to look at the data in terms of the reality is that a vast majority of organization right now, as we speak, don't know what is being used within the organization. They
Yeah.
don't have a full picture. That's scary. Because you see the headline, Christian. We've seen everything that's happening that is causing havoc because of agentic AI and the evolution of it and the autonomous nature of it. It is creating a huge, huge anxiety level with most organizations. But if they don't have a proper picture, they're not taking the time to evaluate what they have, what exists, and bring their people in to train them to detect it and to report it. This is where chaos ensues. And the shit's going to hit the fan and it's going to be bad for the organization.
Um, that's that interlaces actually quite well with just kind of thinking about, over the last, couple decades as people have and businesses have adopted technology readily. There's this kind of phrase that we've used in the industry that the cloud is only just someone else's computer, right? And everyone has just had this like trusting, oh, it's got delegated to this third party or this technology provider or this partner, that kind of stuff. And kind of like that's been a bit of the times of the wild, wild west. So where the companies data and processes lived and all that kind of stuff. And now with the advent of AI, that is really kind of like a paradigm shift, I guess, to your point on the governance of where does it actually live? What have we been trusting so far that we really shouldn't be trusting anymore, right?
Well, yeah, because, from a human perspective, you don't let people into your house or into your business that you don't vet.
Mm.
Okay? You don't let people that can actually steal your stuff, steal your IP. When people come in, well, they need to be credible. You need to be vetted. You need to know what the hell they're doing in your business. But with a lot of organizations, they're bringing in AI tools or letting their people bring AI tools without visibility, without control, without any layer of consistency to make sure that it is not stealing your IP. It is not opening up for more vulnerability in terms of cybersecurity. So that is as a recipe for disaster for any organization. And the solution, we'll talk about it, but the key here at the core is what exists within the organization.
Yeah.
You need to do that at the core. At the very least, you need to have an inventory. What is happening within the organization? It's not just from a technical perspective, it's all the human perspective. Who is using what and how are they bringing it in?
It's a really good point, and really kind of like diving into that of where AI is entering the business for organizations. Like you were noting, there's that initial kind of start with thinking about what your procurement team's actually doing, what's actually authorized by teams and all that, but then getting a little bit further because there is shadow AI when people don't necessarily have the training provided to them as staff members of what the company's overall strategy and plan
Yep.
is,
Yep.
or if tools get dropped on their desk, but they're not adequately trained on them. They see some other tool that they feel might be better for the particular task that they're performing, and they just go and choose to purchase their own tools or leverage their own tools. So the different ways I think that organizations need to think about this is number one, the embedded features, right? This is all
Yep.
the software as a service stuff that you've had, or any software that you have in your organization that is kind of more conventional software that's installed on people's computers, like Adobe PDF Reader, having AI components packaged into it. And then obviously those software and technology providers updating their terms of service, and pretty much being a type of terms of service update where, hey, if you're using it, you agree to it, not necessarily getting your consent, not really getting your ensuring that you understand how AI is going to be interacting with your data, if it's going to be training off your data or not. So there's just that initial element first. So, what tools do we already have in our enterprise that we know AI is being put into, right? The 95% of organizations use Windows for desktop operating systems on their computers. For staff members, Windows 11 has all types of AI features that are ingrained in that. As just an initial starting point, that was put into the product stack. Do you have any oversight on how people are using the Copilot that's embedded in the Windows operating system? Do you have the ability to be able to control what the AI is responding with or what it's doing on the operating system with people? If you don't intend on having those features be used by your staff members, then you're going to have to go out of the way to disable those features and those functionality. And we'll talk more about that from an implementation standpoint in a couple moments. But that's just something that touches almost like everyone's computer, right? By default is, you got AI on Windows. You have AI, with some level of implementation in the Mac OS ecosystem and on iOS for mobile devices. Obviously, Google with Android devices. But then there's the other element of diving deeper with the shadow AI that people are leveraging. I've even seen it where people have browser plugins to help with things, and people are installing these browser plugins that they may not really truly understand what it's doing, and the level of access that browser plugin gets to somebody's data on not just the standpoint of what you intend to have on maybe that page that you're viewing in your web browser at that moment, but also all the other pages, your history, what might be other pieces of information are stored in your web browser, like settings or secrets and passphrases, tokens, all that kind of stuff. Plugins, depending on the types of permissions that they get set with, can get a lot of information from everything else that's in the web browser. So folks should be really cognizant, keep that in mind, that that's another major avenue. There's obviously the avenue with, I think, people being pragmatic and thinking about, okay, we're going to use AI as part of our development processes, part of our software development lifecycle, using the more conventional AI harnesses like Anthropic's, Claude, or OpenAI's ChatGPT for the organization. But just going beyond that, then there's the fourth party spillover. You're working with various vendors, partners, technology providers, service providers, and okay, how are they using data or using your data with AI? Well, how does that affect the quality of the service that they're going to provide you? Beyond the fact that obviously, that AI, what's the level of implementation on? Is it training off your data or not? But just how does that impact the quality of the service, the reproducibility of the service being consistent, all that? Those are key factors for folks to keep in mind. So I guess building off of this and that those factors and really diving into the human and business element, Pat, do you want to kind of like launch that off for us, that thought process further?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. And you make the point here, third party and the fourth party risk profile,
Mhm.
that's the highest risk that any organization will face. Why? Because it's not just not knowing what you have, it's what your third party and fourth party have. Because let's be clear, AI is embedded in almost all of the traditional software providers. Everybody's getting onto the AI bandwagon. So that knowledge of the fact that these third party have that is critical. But on top of that, it's that human factor because your people and the people in the third party or your partners, are hiding a lot of time what they're using. Why? Because from a productivity pressure, there's everybody is going on a bandwagon. Yeah, we need to apply AI, or they are scared and anxious. So no, we're going to be going slowly, but we still want you to perform at a higher level. We still want you to meet your numbers every month. Okay. So people are not stupid. They're looking around and say, oh my God, I can increase my productivity by using ChatGPT, by using Claude. So, okay, it's not sanctioned by the business, but on Friday afternoon, the boss is asking me to, generate this report. And guess what? I don't have time. Well, I'm going to use my ChatGPT on my phone, my tablet, or I'm going to circumvent control and use it on my computer.
Mhm.
And they're bringing that. And what's important here is, from the knowledge that these people are not trying to be, to break the rules for breaking rules. They're just falling under the pressure to perform. And they will invariably adopt the tools that will enable them to be more productive. So they will take that, but they don't have the training, the knowledge, the capacity to understand that, oh, well, I'm going to put this IP or the proprietary information or privacy information onto a public LLM. Guess what? Now it's open and accessible to everybody. So that human element is one of the biggest factor of risk because if you don't train your people, if you don't provide them the tool, if you don't provide them the opportunity to experiment with these tools, guess what's going to happen? It's going to explode in your face. It will, because the people themselves, not by malice, but by sheer ignorance or by not having the ability to really comprehend what they're doing, are going to increasing your risk and your exposure because they don't understand that the open LLM, even closed LLM, will steal your information, steal your IP. It will provide you illusion of competency by generating data and outputs that you're not vetting,
Yeah.
or the fact that most people don't understand that LLM today are designed for sycophancy. They're designed to please you, to make you think that what you're getting is all great, and it'll give you and invent a source. But if you don't take the time to actually verify and validate, it's they're going to invent stuff.
Yeah.
So moving and continuing on to the next stage is it's important here not for organization, not simply to say, okay, I'm scared about all the risks related to AI, so we're going to close the gate. You're just going to use, Microsoft Copilot, and that's it. So you can do a lot, but if you don't train them how to use it, guess what? It's still going to blow up in your face. But what's going to happen is that people are going to try to circumvent, and they're going to try to circumvent the controls, the governance, and bringing in the use of AI that will increase your cybersecurity risk, your governance risk, your privacy, and all of the risk from a regulatory perspective that will cause you legal and regulatory exposure. Not just the fact that your system may go down. You may have regulators coming in, and you may be sued. So you have to take the time to really build an infrastructure that will allow your people to know how to use AI properly. And that's where, using the concierge. So you don't just block people from using it. you try to provide them the tools, the training, the infrastructure to use it well. So it limits your liability and increases productivity because people will know exactly how to use it.
It's I think a lot of the theme that I'm picking up here is it's about being deliberate with the choices that you're
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
And first initially defining what you're trying to get out of the usage of AI, what processes, where that can help certain individuals across different teams, and then getting them comfortable with what capabilities are at their fingertips, making sure that they're educated about it, and that they're also aware of those risks in that
Yeah.
adoption process, and then the technical controls get layered in with that cultural.
Yeah. And it's got to be continuous, Christian, because the AI models and technology and output capability is increasing at a scale and scope and speed that the policies can't keep up with. So if you don't train your people, it's not the once a year training on AI, and compliance and ethics. That's not going to work. You need to do it continuously. Give people a chance to work and play and experiment in a sandbox so they're confident with it. Have that tiger team, the cross-functional team that really monitors things and allow people to experiment to see where things work. And it's not just about plugging, hey, we've got an AI tool, go at it and fly.
Hmm.
That's a recipe for disaster.
The there's this aspect, I guess, like talking to folks where sometimes at the crossroads of cybersecurity and compliance and technology, uh, people will say, "Well, like, yeah, we just didn't know about that thing. Like, sorry, we were just kind of naive about that and not being deliberate in the choices that they were making for their organization,
That's right.
or choosing to not make a choice, which inherently is in itself a choice, right? Because
Yes.
people are going to adapt to that, like you were
Yeah,
saying, they're gonna have this pressure to pick up the tools
absolutely. And
themselves.
they will. They will. The pressure to perform will absolutely trump any controls or policies that will exist. And
So
go ahead.
I was about to say, so if you could just educate folks a little bit too, like what you've seen throughout kind of history here so far on like why we don't know isn't really a defensible like position.
Okay. If you think, would you allow your kids or your employee to simply say, when the shit hits the fan, something happens that is preventable, and they go, well, I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't understand. Well, that's not a defense from a regulatory perspective, from a basic common sense perspective, from a cybersecurity, um, you know, destruction perspective. If you don't do anything, and your go-to is that, well, we just didn't know that it was going to happen. Guess what? From any regulatory or legal liability perspective, that's not a defense. Saying you don't know is not a defense because your insurance company is not going to give you the claim if you demonstrate that you've been negligent in governing and in deploying your AI tools. If you've been negligent in not knowing what you have in place, not having the right control, the training, the right governance structure, okay, and the right culture to manage these risks, guess what's going to happen? From Air Canada to Samsung to Workday, these are just examples of organizations that failed to have that governance structure, that failed to plan ahead, and to and when they went to court, especially Air Canada, this chatbot that created out of the blue without human intervention, new policies that allowed people to claim discounts. Well, guess what? You are responsible for any output that any AI tool that your company uses produces. You are responsible for it. So going back to try to defend from it in a legal perspective, a regulatory, it, you don't know or I didn't know is not a defense for in any court or with your insurance company. So the liability here lies with you, with the human.
Hmm.
Okay, and it is critical for any organization, any leaders to understand that well, we didn't understand what the AI was going to do, um, that's not going to fly with anybody. You need to know it. It is your fiduciary, legal, and moral responsibility to know. And it's not about putting in a whole bunch of of controls and policies for the sake of it. You need to have a risk profile. You need to be able to demonstrate that what you have addresses the risk that you're facing. So it's not to stop your business or slow down your business development. It's to protect that integrity, that process that you have.
The theme that you're talking about, by the way, how rapidly evolving things are, being deliberate in the choices that you're making, trying to be well governed. A lot of times I find myself almost being exhausted with how many
Oh,
updates are happening
totally,
all of the time.
totally.
And I think that there's a practical reminder for everyone that there is also, to a certain degree, a lot of the AI companies that we all hear about and talk about, Anthropic, OpenAI, what Google's doing, Microsoft's doing, and whatnot. They're even, but many times, flying by the seat of their pants, and that's obviously not great. I think a lot of us have heard about what's happened, like in the news and all that, with OpenAI and then Anthropic going back and forth, like, oh yeah, we're in our AI testing, we accidentally hacked blah 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 company. Oh, what, we actually hacked 3 other companies this
Yes,
weekend.
yes.
Is absolutely crazy. But there's this comment that came in, and I really love this here. So the comment kind of goes on a little bit about the fact that now that there are and they actually posted a
Yep,
really great article talking about this, but the fact that there's new research out for stealing reasoning traces
yeah,
from proprietary large language model APIs, that this is an architectural flaw with a lot of these model providers, which is really problematic for those model providers, because that means that now you have either open weight companies or Chinese companies being able to duplicate that type of inference work. But I think it's just a perfect example of talking about, or reminding everyone about, governance here, right? That
yes.
these AI technology companies have a bit of the pragmatism falling by the wayside here, and that's not one of the things, as other organizations, be it if you're a small business or an enterprise, where you want to take that level of risk and replicate that behavior, right?
Yeah.
It's not acceptable behavior to say, oh yeah, by the way, we committed all these federal crimes. And isn't that really cool? Isn't that really cool? That it's not cool, right? In
No.
many ways, it's absolutely insanely irresponsible and incompetent, or is a absolutely grotesque marketing stunt,
I
right? Somewhere in
It
between,
is.
right?
It
Right.
is. In today's day and age, with the risk environment that people face,
Mhm.
if you don't have at least a minimal viable governance structure of AI, it's not when it's going to blow up in your face. It's it's not if it's going to blow up in your face. It's when,
Yeah,
because it will happen. Okay, invariably it's going to happen.
I mean,
Internally, externally, it's going to happen.
that's one of the first things I always say to people is like, "Well, okay, have you updated your incident response plan?" So what happens if somebody in the organization accidentally sends out 1,000 emails that they weren't supposed to? Because it's going to happen. What
Yeah.
happens if someone's going to delete a bunch of files that are really, really important, that were in SharePoint or OneDrive or Box? Because it's going to happen at one point or another, right? Do
Yes.
you know what your backup
Yes.
plan is, rather than just going full force? So yeah, I certainly agree. So getting into those technical aspects, and diving
Yes.
in here for the team here. So how can we start to discover the shadow use of AI throughout the organization? So the good news is that there are many different logging facilities. There are many different places that you can get this information and then aggregate it together, so that you can also have corroborating findings and information. Now, certainly, by the way, there are a lot of tools out there. There are a lot of shadow AI discovery tools and management tools, and I'll talk about those in a moment with more specific examples. But before saying, oh yeah, go look at this, AI DSPM solution, or go look at this AI shadow discovery solution, more times than not, most organizations have a lot of data sets and a lot of logging facilities already set up in place that they can start to leverage and utilize. So, for example, if you're an organization that's using Microsoft 365, you will be able to know who is starting to connect up AI to their Microsoft 365 account, because that is all information that's stored in the Entra ID authentication environment. Enterprise apps or OAuth apps, where people can see what external applications have access to Microsoft resources and to what level of permissions. So my general point that I'm making here is that going back to our kind of AI Tiger team, we got all these different facilities. These different facilities can trigger the different members of our AI Tiger team, starting with the obviously technology department. So what's in our what has connectivity to our Microsoft 365 environment, or for a Google organization, in Google Workspace, the OAuth apps that are listed there. So easy start. Okay, now we know what's talking to the business collaboration suite that we have kind of going on. Okay, now what's on our devices? What about our corporate devices? Well, leveraging a lot of the same tools that your IT department's going to leverage to secure your devices, to help deploy them, to keep them well configured, be it if it's an IT remote monitoring management solution like Ninja One, or it's built in with Microsoft Intune for device management. You can grab software inventory reports from all the devices within your ecosystem and then have that aggregated together. So now you have a relationship not just to things that are connecting to software as a service systems like Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, but also what's running on your company devices. There's also a relationship between those devices and those SaaS connections to individual users within the organization. Now you know what their titles are too. So now you can start to understand, maybe if people are engaging in shadow use of AI, maybe what was the intended purpose or function of that? This way, when you come in, rather than just slapping someone's hand and telling them, no, that's wrong, that's bad, helping give them the tools to be successful in whatever they were trying to accomplish, right? So understanding those workflows so that you can educate them at the same time too, while obviously letting them know about the things that they shouldn't be doing, right? Of course, there is, with most organizations, some level of a network perimeter. A lot of organizations have some type of physical office footprint. Even remote organizations might be able to get a lot of network telemetry because they might be using zero trust network access control solutions, be it if it's something like Cloudflare or it's something else. But the point of the matter is that you can get also just the web traffic that goes back and forth with everything that's on your network, with your corporate workstations and devices. So this way, you're getting some insight beyond what the software is installed, but also just interactions that are generally in the web browser, or if there was software installed, where it's actually talking outbound to, right? In conjunction with that, there's browser management solutions. So most organizations that I talk to, they're really worried about hackers breaking into the organization through staff members being socially engineered and clicking a phishing link and all that type of stuff. One of the elements that the hackers engage in is deploying malicious browser plugins. And like I was just talking about a little bit earlier, if you use an AI extension or plugin to your web browser, that has a lot more control and access than you really know, right? And so working with the technology team as well, what you can do is you can say, hey, we're using Microsoft Edge, or we're using Google Chrome over here. Are those managed browsers where we can see what plugins are installed? Can we start to think about enforcing those? Which we're going to dive into all the enforcement stuff in just a couple moments. Now, also, there is then the cybersecurity team in themselves that are going to have their own logging facilities. They might have what we call data loss prevention solutions in place that can see traffic going inbound and outbound of the network or on devices. And that's some level of granularity that you can get information from. But also the organization's security information event management solution, or their SIM solution. And that having a very granular log of processes that run on devices, things that get executed on devices, communications between devices and network information or network infrastructure and other information systems. So that's a great place to also look. Now, I also believe that there's this intersection with the rest of the AI Tiger team where you can also you can leverage data sources that are not just a regular technology data source. A great example would be, hey, we're trying to build a good governance program and adopting AI. We know that we have a trillion different AI solutions out there. Some are kind of like in this semi-sanctioned place. Let's work with the finance team to look through our bookkeeping systems and all that, and look at all the transactions that have been classified to software as a service AI solutions that we're leveraging throughout the business. That gives you some level of inventory and insight. That also gives you insight into the cost controls, so that from a governance and adoption standpoint, you know how much there's maybe like redundant spend and all that kind of stuff going on, like we previously talked about. And then the last element with the other odds and ends with maybe code that you're developing, software composition and analysis tools like GitHub, Dependabot, and the dependency checker and dependency graph. Other elements of the third parties and the vendors that Pat, you and I were really just hammering down a moment for folks, like what are in those privacy policies? Are you looking at those privacy policies? Are you looking at any updated terms of service? If it's a smaller technology provider consultancy firm that you're collaborating with and working with, reaching out to them if they don't have information about their AI usage and how that intersects with your services that you're getting or your data in their privacy policy. Reach out to them. Perform some level of due diligence questionnaire. How are you using AI? How does that interact with our data? What types of areas are there key decision points that are being made that maybe AI is involved in and might affect our services? Things like that. Really practical starting out questions, just so you can identify a map.
Yeah, without assurance that they provide.
Yeah. So now that we got some initial data set and inventory, then we could start to talk about the enforcement of controls. Now, before I fully transfer a transition over to that, I just want to call out, there are, again, tons and tons of solutions that are out there. I'm not going to, anything that we go to talk about here in a moment, we're not endorsing, we're not sponsoring, we're not partners, we don't get kickbacks for anything like that. These are just general, like, hey, this is what we see for a lot of organizations and what they're doing or what they're leveraging. Here are some things to think about. But if you're ever looking for like the greatest and greatest insights on different AI specific solutions, be if it's commercial or open source, that's going to help you with your governance program. It's going to help you with the inventory. It's going to help you with preventing prompt injection attacks or compliance and security monitoring. Certainly, there are a ton of them in the OWASP AI security solutions landscape. And it really is great for breaking down those different layers where the different commercial and open source offerings help folks with that, so that you can then think about, is this something that maybe we want to leverage or utilize? Now, before I ever say go buy another thing, I always begin to use what we already have in-house, right? So establishing a sanctioned path. So going down the sanctioned path that we have here, first and foremost, you want to start helping prevent the use of shadow AI. Is start with the cybersecurity and technology fundamentals that your business should already be engaging in, which is having things like single sign-on in place, so that people are not logging in manually to Claude over here or into ChatGPT over here, that it's using the same authentication credentials and token and relationship to your Microsoft 365 environment or your Google Workspace environment. That's going to help ensure that when somebody does go to log in, right, then you have oversight over that, those accounts that are being forced into that governance kind of structure, governance by design, so to speak. And you can then leverage that in conjunction with other really helpful controls, like what we call conditional access policies. So, for a lot of organizations that we work with, they'll typically deploy what we call device level conditional access policies. So this way, even if a staff member had their Microsoft 365 account compromised, the password, hacker got past multi-factor authentication, all that kind of stuff, hacker can't actually compromise the email. They can't compromise the associated OneDrive account and SharePoint sites and all that, because the hacker's trying to log in from a non-corporate joined device. So if we have these kind of conditional access controls in place, it's not just about preventing hackers, but also, again, just these shadow activities that staff members can engage in, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally, but when they then go to, let's say, log into Claude, and that's going to go check in with Microsoft 365, Microsoft 365 is going to check to say, are you on an approved company device? Or maybe a BYOD mobile application managed device. Okay, you are on an approved device. Now you can sign all the way into Claude. So now you're enforcing, not just leveraging the company's Claude organizational account, but also on company systems. That if they tried to log into their corporate Claude account on a personal device, not going to happen, right? We can continue that kind of journey or that path here. And I'm just going to zoom this in for folks so everyone can kind of see some of the additional details. But when we go to set up the authentication, that then kind of filters down into ensuring even if someone tried to set up an account with Claude with company email address, they're not allowed to. Or we can configure both Claude and ChatGPT in the underlying device settings that when it gets pushed to everyone's company devices through something like Intune, that in those device settings or in the application settings, it doesn't allow someone to log into a personal Claude account or a personal ChatGPT account on a company device. It requires them to use the company domain, right? So this governance by design is forcing folks into the right pipeline, forcing folks into good process, obviously in conjunction with what you want to have in place for training folks and setting them up for success. And then we continue that with thinking about the other controls that we can continue to deploy. Those controls, go across a number of other systems, but you can think about it. Okay, we have a VPN solution that's in place, or we have a zero trust network access solution that's in place, or a web filtering solution. Okay, we have a list of unapproved AI solutions. And by the way, in most of these like ZTNA or web filtering solutions, they already have like a pre-curated list of AI solutions. So you can select the category and say, hey, block the outbound traffic to that type of stuff, right? If you have any type of data loss prevention solutions in place, having a data loss prevention solution, not just protect company data that might be confidential and sensitive and all that kind of stuff, but now what type of AI connectors through Purview, what types of permissions on those files or the data labels on those files can AI connectors even be able to view or see or know that that type of data exists? Those are really, really helpful aspects for forcing behind the scenes an invisible hand of governance and good process. Same thing with having managed browsers that are in place and continuous analysis of the environment, continuing to hunt this down. I think, Pat, earlier we were kind of talking about the fact that much of this, I think, is just kind of stemming from the realization for organizations now, coming out of 20 years of just trust the cloud, put things into the cloud, trust third parties, that there was a lot of elements where there was just implicit trust that's been baked into all elements of organizational processes, technology controls, cybersecurity controls. And now we're all starting to wake up and say, wait, we actually really need to think about locking this stuff down.
Yep.
And define the controls. I think most people, when you talk to them and you sit down for them for a second, you say, hey, should we allow all of our staff members to just install whatever plugins they want in their web browsers? Most people are going to say, no, that's a terrible idea. That's a really, really, really bad idea. But unfortunately, for a lot of organizations I still encounter today, they don't have fully managed browsers to control plugin access and all that kind of stuff. And the browser is the gateway to all the other interactions for the business. And they're going to allow something that could be compromised so easily, right? Through ungoverned plugins. So really just hitting on those factors, Pat, of you saying, hey, people need to be deliberate with their choices. Be pragmatic with the questions that they're asking, and kind of setting forth a path of not just, now we've discovered it, but really saying, this is how we intend on leveraging this at this stage or moment in time, and then building upon that. What else would you like to add to that, Pat?
Well, I think, you went through a really practical series of solutions and tools here. And, we've got a different type of audience. We've got CIO, we've got CCOs, we've got the gamut of people. And really, at the end of the day, our listeners need to understand that they have to have visibility, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. What do they have? Okay, if they don't have visibility, They don't know what they're facing in terms of risk, and they can't manage it. And what you mentioned, what you outlined, is not a bunch of policies to slow down productivity or business development. It's about having consistent and trusted process that will allow people to thrive, but in a safe environment. Because the reality today is not what we had 5 or 10 years ago. The risk environment has multiplied and increased exponentially. And if you don't have that minimal viable governance and cybersecurity structure, it will blow up in your face. Shit will happen. It's invariable. So, and what we have to change our mindset and the way we look at it is that this is a collective responsibility. It's not just the responsibility of IT. It's the responsibility of every single player within the organization, every stakeholder. They need to have the proper training, the proper awareness, because they're not going to raise their hand or say, "Oh, am I right? Am I doing the right thing?" If they don't have the right context, if they don't have the right training, and it's not the once a year stuff. Okay, this is the reality today. You have autonomous AI agent that can cause havoc in your organization. You don't know what they can do. And they're increasing in capacity and capability every single day. So if you don't have that basic infrastructure of the culture, that training, the processes, and we've seen it, Christian, that there's people in organizations, they don't even have the proper control environment with Microsoft 365 and Purview. They haven't toggled it.
I was about to say, yeah, a lot of folks, they have E5 licensing.
But that's just it. They don't have that minimal awareness that, guess what? Yes, there's tools out there. Within your risk profile, you need to get those tools depending where you are. But if you don't even know that what you have right now within your framework with Microsoft can do a heck of a lot of things to prevent and detect and mitigate your risk, you're totally out of the loop. And it's not just a responsibility, again, of the CIO, of the technical people. Every layer from upper management to board to the clerk need to understand where their responsibility lies and to provide them the tools and the knowledge to be much more proactive in this.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I know we are at time, and everyone, thank you for joining me and Pat. This has been a fantastic conversation, Pat. Pat, thank you again for just another outstanding conversation. Certainly, one of the things I always love to do is dive into the technical nuances and the details. So just for everyone watching here, we will certainly have some additional content and information for you guys coming out in the next couple of days. Technical guides with different types of solutions that are out there, be it if you're a Microsoft 365 shop or a Google Workspace shop and all that kind of stuff. So be sure to stay attuned to that. And also, don't forget that you guys can also check into any of the previous masterclass series, as well as keep your eye on the ball for the upcoming masterclass series here at this link, as well as just following us on LinkedIn in general. Our next webcast will be on August 26th, where we're going to be talking about deploying the right controls, both from a culture standpoint and a technology standpoint. As you guys are not just watching this session or looking back at previous recordings, be sure to keep the conversations coming on LinkedIn, and certainly we'll incorporate that into our discussions moving forward.
Yeah, please. I invite people to actually share some of the challenges that they face with us and with the rest of the audience, because this is the way we're going to be able to move forward if we share our best practices and knowledge.
Certainly. And I'm super excited about the rest of the webcast series coming up here. So with that, thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it, and stay safe and stay